We should have audio and video here in a few seconds. It's been 2 weeks since I've seen you. I've been out of the country. Had a nice time, by the way. And I'm delighted to be back. It's fun being gone, but home is my favorite place by far. No contest, actually. So we have quite a few questions that were sent in. I don't know if it's because you guys were really active sending me questions or if it's because it's been 2 weeks. But we've got quite a few. So I'm going to start right in. First writer says, as I learn about real love, I'm changing a lot. I don't even think I know who I am anymore. And that was it. That's a short comment. And little wonder. But my comment would be that real love doesn't so much change who you are. I would look at it another way. It's imitation love, and it's really emptiness and fear, and our use of imitation love and getting protecting behaviors that cover up who we are. If you want, I think it's either in the blogs or in one of the video chats, there's a story of the mud prints. You can read about that. It's kind of an interesting metaphor about that subject. But when we're empty and afraid and using imitation love and getting protecting behaviors, we're so absorbed with those things that who we are gets completely lost. We're completely distracted by constantly getting and protecting that we have no idea who we really are. And it's as we begin to feel unconditionally loved and can finally relax and can finally settle down and quit running around like chickens with our heads cut off, and can start acting, can start making decisions on our own instead of constantly reacting, and can stop thrashing about like drowning people in the water. It's only when we can calm down and make proactive choices that we discover who we really are. So rather than real love changing who we are, real love allows us to discover who we are. It's a really delightful experience. And many people have said this to me. Wow, what a treat to finally find out who I am. Another way to describe it is that on one occasion I was describing to a woman, all of her getting and protecting behaviors. And as I was describing them to her, she said, well, but if I gave those up, who would I be? She said, well, I'd have to give up everything that I am. And I said, well, gee, wouldn't that be a shame? I mean, wouldn't it be a shame if you had to give up being angry and attacking people and acting like a victim and lying and running and whining and manipulating people? And gee, wouldn't that be just a horrible loss to the world and to yourself? What are you losing? And in the process to discover who you really are, how can you lose in that bargain? So it's a delight. Sometimes people will say, well, when I don't feel loved, I don't know who I am. No, you really don't. And won't it be fun to find out? So it's just delightful to feel loved and finally discover what it's like to figure it out. And people won't have to tell you who you are. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out just fine. And it's a lovely discovery. Here's somebody who says, I feel like I'm drowning in details. Could you distill for me the most important qualities of an effective coach and what you see as the best ways to get there? Well, there's a whole book about that, Real Love for Wise Men and Women, but as you say here, I'm drowning in details. So could it be distilled? Yeah, it really can. It comes down to truth and love. So tell the truth about yourself, because you can't, certainly as a coach, expect other people to do that unless you can. Being willing to tell the truth about yourself, in the process of which you will find out what it's like to be unconditionally loved yourself. And as you feel more loved, then you will acquire the ability to be a more loving person. Notice I said be. It's a matter of being. So loving other people as a coach. So first you tell the truth and get loved. And then it's about loving and teaching. That's what coaches do. That's one word. Love and teach. Loving and teaching other people isn't a technique. It's a state of being. It's something that wise men and women just do. And I don't mean to make it sound all mystical, because in the beginning you do have to think about it. But in the beginning, there's a whole lot of quietness to it. The most loving thing you can do in the beginning is really empathetically listening. Lots of listening. And very little fixing. So as somebody is speaking, if your first thought is, well, now I know what you should do, you're probably not about to be loving, which is why the phrase is love and teach, not open your big mouth and fix people and love. See, that's not the phrase. It's love and teach, and love is first for a reason. So people need to feel loved and accepted long before they will allow you to teach them anything. So if you attempt to teach them before they feel loved, they're only going to feel controlled. And if you try to do that before you're genuinely loving, they're right. You probably are trying to control them. So that's the thing. And if you are genuinely loving on the occasions when you do teach, it has to be done with genuine fearlessness. Now, how do you learn to do this? Practice, practice, practice. Lots of it. You practice constantly. You go on the conference calls and you practice loving and teaching. You encourage people on these conference calls. You say, I'd be willing to take some personal calls from anybody here on the conference call. Don't sit there like a lump and expect to learn to become a loving person. Actually say on the conference calls, is there anybody here who would like to practice making loving calls? Say, I would be willing to be one of those people you call. People sit on the calls and expect to learn to become a wise man or wise woman by osmosis. Stick your neck out. Whether you're practicing to become a professional coach or not is irrelevant. If you want to learn to become more loving, which is, by the way, far more fun than simply becoming loved, then volunteer. Raise your hand. Say, please call me, which will involve, of course, making mistakes. Well, gee, too bad. Ask people if they'd be willing to call you and practice with them. And then when you make mistakes, then on the next call, you say, I'd like to discuss a call that I made or that a call somebody made to me, and I think I probably did this wrong, or it didn't go very well, or something. And then get the feedback from people who are more experienced than you. Practice, practice, practice. So, tell the truth, get loved, love and teach, and then practice again. That's pretty simple. It's just really not so very terribly complicated, as most things are not. Somebody asked for some examples of what people have found out when they find out who they are. Many people have thought that who they are, for example, was afraid. And many people have thought that who they were was outgoing or talented, or you ask people who they are and they describe all these things that are fairly meaningless. And it turns out that that who they are turns out to be really simple things. They discover that who they are is, for example, is somebody who is calm, peaceful, loving, caring, intensely interested in learning, a teacher, somebody who has an innate desire to teach other people, whereas somebody else may have more, for example, a desire to serve other people rather than be a teacher. Though everybody has different talents, for example. Well, many people didn't realize they had an innate interest or talent to teach until they got rid of their fears. So many of us don't learn what our talents or abilities or innate desires are until we get rid of our fears. Like, for example, some people have a horrifying fear of public speaking. Well, once we feel sufficiently loved and our fear of other people goes away and our fear of public speaking goes away, it turns out we actually have a natural desire to teach or even speak. So those are just an example of a few things people have learned about themselves. Some people have discovered, for example, that they have a natural desire to be peacemakers, which is different than being people pleasers. Quite different. And it's been interesting to watch people discover the difference between those desires. So little what appear to be subtleties, and they're not subtleties. They're chasmic differences. Here's somebody who writes, last night I invited some people to a local pizza joint to share some pizza. We were sitting at a long table and one woman in our group placed her stroller between our table and the path of anyone walking down the aisle. I noticed it as I got up to get some napkins for our table. So, picture, there's the group gathered and she just plops her, stroller right in everybody's way. She was just talking away, holding her 9-month-old at the same time, and appeared to have no clue that her stroller was in the way. I almost said something, and I almost moved the stroller, but I said to myself, it's none of my business. And this was hard, since I come from a family that loves to correct. And as I sat there eating my pizza, every once in a while I would catch the looks from people that would squeeze through the opening because they were inconvenienced by the stroller. In the past, I would have jumped up and moved the stroller to help these strangers so that I would look good to these other people. Now, I can just sit and let things be, which is remarkable. I actually kept catching myself looking at other people's faces and feeling a small flash of that need to help, but I just let it pass. Interestingly, enough of the 20 or so people that passed, or of the 6 people at the table, no one said anything about the stroller. So here's my issue. The stroller was making it hard for people to get by, and somebody could have dropped a drink or food or whatever. And even though the woman was with our group, the stroller was not mine and none of my business. Now, in the past, I would have said something. So, is it better to just let it be, or is it loving to ask if you can move the stroller? I would assume that, excuse me, do you mind if I move your stroller, would be one loving way of asking. But is it really necessary to ask? For me, this is... Anyway, so he's wondering, should I do anything about it? In the past, I would have used sarcasm or been critical. He's just wondering what to do about this. And what I would suggest is that it's all about loving. It's not about the stroller. So, always ask yourself, it's always about real love. So, if you say to yourself, well, but, as soon as we go to reason and justify in our minds then we're about to make a mistake. Well, but the stroller is in other people's way. We're just about to intrude and control into somebody else's life and control somebody, and we're just about to make excuses for it. So if you're thinking, well, I've got to do this, I'm compelled to do this because it's in other people's way, the odds that you're about to do that in a loving way are pretty close to zero. So if you're going to speak with irritation, if you're coming up with a justification to do it, don't speak. It doesn't matter how many people are inconvenienced by the stroller. So what? They can either squeeze by the stroller, or, I have a feeling it's not the only passageway in the entire restaurant, they can walk around some other tables. They can go outside and come through the other door. It doesn't matter what the inconvenience is. Too bad. We're talking about a few extra seconds that it would take for them to get around that obstacle. It's irrelevant. There isn't anything worth getting angry about and giving up your happiness. There isn't anything worth giving up our happiness over. So, if you're feeling irritated, it isn't worth mentioning. Now, if you're not irritated, you're feeling loving, you're not feeling bothered in any way, then you can always offer unconditionally, with no expectations, any comment you want to make, any time you want. It's always about real love. And if you're feeling loving, then go ahead and make a comment. For example, you might stand up, and if you're feeling loving, it really doesn't matter what words you speak. That's the cool thing. I mean, I've been in audiences where somebody has been disruptive, and if you're feeling loving, you can say, "Would you please shut up?" If you're feeling loving, people will erupt in laughter and they'll stop talking. If you're feeling loving, you can get away with saying anything. Whereas if you're not feeling loving, it doesn't matter how diplomatically you speak, people will sense that you're irritated and it will go badly. So it's not about the words. But if you're feeling loving, the fewer words the better. Because I've learned that the more words you use, the more you're making it about you. That's a fact. The more words you use, the more likely it is that you're justifying, manipulating, lying, using people, and so on. Fewer words. So if you're loving, you would stand up and you would say to the person whose stroller it was, "Do you mind if I fold this up and set it over there out of the way?" Done. The odds that somebody would be irritated by that kind gesture are so close to zero if you do that in a loving way. In all the years that I've made an offer like that to somebody, let me think. I can't think of the last time somebody said no. They're not going to care. Whereas if you stand up and go, and in a real calm voice, but you're irritated, and you say, this is in people's way. And everybody, 18 of the last 20 people who have gone by have been inconvenienced by this. And so I just wondered if you would mind if I move this to the other side of the room. You're going to get fight. No matter how cleverly you put it, they're going to fight you. So it's all about the loving, not the words. And yet we think we're so clever with our justifications, don't we? Actually, we look like idiots. So it's about the loving. Everybody wants love. Everybody. Let's see. Here's somebody who says, "I've been feeling periods of happiness lately." Oh my goodness, then you better stop doing what you're doing. It might be infectious. You might be experiencing periods of happiness that would become more frequent. They might last longer. She says, like real joy, dancing in the rain type happiness. This could become dangerous. It doesn't last long at one time, she says, but it is getting more frequent. My question is, if I keep telling the truth and feeling loved, will these feelings happen all the time? No, dear, you don't have to worry about that. I'm just teasing you. Actually, the more you tell the truth and the more you feel loved and the more time you spend around people who are capable of loving you, and especially the more that you love others, the more often it happens and the longer it lasts. And do the math. I mean, look at a timeline. It happens more often and they last longer, and eventually these little periods of happiness start to coalesce into longer periods of time. And I mean, look at the theory. Eventually this would happen all the time. And then she says, is this what they call enlightenment? Well, I don't know who they is, but sure. Love and light are kind of synonyms, because misery is darkness and love leads to happiness, which is light. So sure, that is what enlightenment is, which is not what many people envision mystical enlightenment being. It's not simply the possession of wisdom. It's not what you get under the lotus tree from contemplation. It's what you get from living a loving life, which is much harder than sitting under, actually not a lotus tree, since lotus is actually a blossom that usually springs from a bog, but sitting under a banyan tree in the lotus position. Sitting under a tree and simply meditating, I mean, if that were the way to enlightenment, that's too easy. Finding true happiness is harder. It comes from interacting with the idiots in the world, like me. I mean, it comes from interacting with people who are difficult and selfish and who step on our toes and who are unkind and who say mean-spirited and harsh things and who offend us and who take things from us and who don't do what we want. That's where you find enlightenment, because that's how you learn to forgive. That's how you learn to be patient and tolerant and kind and loving. You know, people get on their knees at night and they say, "Oh Lord, help me to be loving and kind and patient and forgiving." And then they expect that to come, I suppose, in the form of a time-release capsule. Well, how did you think that was going to happen? And so God, or however you prefer it, the universe, does what? Sends you an incredibly unkind and mean-spirited person from whom you learn to be patient and kind and tolerant and forgiving and all of that. That's where we learn these things. It doesn't come in the form of a pill. Unless, of course, it's a person with a pill. So, I'm delighted for you. It's thrilling to find these periods of happiness coming more frequently and for longer periods of time. It's very fun. Here's somebody who had asked a question 2 or 3 weeks ago about a partner, woman, she said, whose partner she was noticing occasionally was checking out, and I don't mean like as in running their foreheads through a scanner in the store, but a partner who was checking out other women. Kind of doing the visual undressing as they would like go to stores. And and she was wondering how she could bring this up with him. And apparently when she did, he would, of course, deny it and become offended and angry, as most men do, which I always find hysterical, because I've watched men say, oh no, I wasn't checking that woman out, right after I have watched them check women out. And it's undeniable what they were doing. But they have to deny it, because how are they going to admit that to their girlfriend or their wife? Because pretty much all men realize deep down that they're being unfaithful to their partners when they're doing that. Because they can't tell their partners what's going through their minds when they're doing that. That's the problem. So anyway, she said, I need help on this. Is it good practice to ask for clarification or state my feelings in the moment? Do I wait until later? It's almost always better to wait until later. Now, there are exceptions, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the reason you wait until later is that people usually don't like being confronted about what they're doing in the moment that they're doing it. They're just more likely to be defensive about what they're doing while they're doing it. Why? Because they're more embarrassed about being caught while their hand is in the cookie jar. They like to have a little separation in time from actually being caught in the crime. So later they're just a little more emotionally separated from it. So it's just a little wiser to wait a little while. You're more likely to have a calmer discussion. And by the way, that is an excellent indication, just for your own information, of their what? Guilt. If your partner were genuinely not doing what he says he's not doing, then he wouldn't mind you talking about it right while he was doing it. But the fact that he is doing it and is guilty, people hate being talked to about what they're doing if they're guilty. If they're not guilty, why would it bother them? Wouldn't bother you at all. If you said to me, if I'm sitting there reading a book, and you came to me and said, Greg, I'd like to talk to you about that woman that you're looking at, then I would say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Because I would have no idea what you're talking about. How could I possibly become angry about it? Whereas if I actually was looking at a woman, then I'd become all, then I would go into my defensive lies, which is what men do when that's what they're doing. So she says, I believe I have a handle on this, and I'm sensitive to timing, but I'm sure that I'm wrong many times. I feel that, and we'll call him Fred, just to protect his real name, which is Tom. No, I'm just teasing. I feel Fred would be happier if I never mentioned if I feel uncomfortable, and then he wouldn't have to deal with it, or perhaps he can't stand letting me down. But he'd have to tell you that for sure. Those are just my feelings. I visually saw him starting to bolt and get tense as I brought up what I felt when I saw him looking at another woman. It is not my intention at all for the man I love to have to revert to a protecting behavior, like, being defensive and lying, just because I'm stating my feelings. Then our voices escalate, and I know we both can't hear anything once that happens. So, rather than attack him for something and imply that he has to change his behavior, I suggest you do this. You just tell him how it looks. You say to him, Fred, yesterday when we were in the store, when we were in Walmart, we were walking along, and you just describe what you saw. You say, we were walking along, and I see guys do this all the time. And you say, we were walking along, and a woman walked by who had an unusually large chest, or who had a large amount of cleavage showing, or whatever. And you say, and I noticed that you turned your head like this for 360 degrees, or whatever it was you saw. You just describe it. You don't say, I saw you undressing her, or you describe exactly what he did. Don't impute motives to it. Don't say, I saw you salivating. Don't just describe what you saw. Just so that he's aware of it. you say, I'm not telling you to change anything. I'm not angry. I'm just describing what I saw so that you're aware of it. Then if he denies that he did it, even though you saw him do it. So you saw him do it, and then he says, no, I didn't. All right, now that's possible. There are many people who are blind to something they do. And if somebody's blind, they're blind. I've seen many people deny doing a thing that I just watched them do. And, I believe them. Some people, with all sincerity, say, no, I didn't. And they just did it. So, he may need help with that. And in that case, what you might do is, you might say, I believe you. Don't keep arguing with somebody who says, no, I didn't. I mean, how stupid does this look? It's like a cartoon. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I did. Did you think this was good? What did you think? Halfway through this, he was going to say, you're right, I did. He's not. So shut up. So what you need to do is immediately say, I believe you. So I believe that there are some behaviors people do without being aware of it. Say that. And so what I'm going to do is help you. I didn't bring it up at the time because I didn't want you to be bothered by it. I didn't want you to feel criticized. So what I'm going to do is help you. And the next time I see you do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach over and I'm going to touch you and look you right in the face, and I'm going to say, you're doing it right now. So that you'll know when you're doing it. And even then, I'm not asking you to stop it. Now, those of you who are listening to me talk to her, just so you know, she's not married to this man. So, now I'm talking back to her. So, you're not asking him to stop it, but you need to be gathering information about this guy. Because if he keeps looking at other women when the two of you are just together, you're not even married, if he keeps this up, you'd have to be a little dense to stay with a guy who can't keep his eyes on you. So the next time you're walking in Walmart and he starts to go like this, you need to right then turn around and step in front of him and say, you're doing it right now with her, and point at her right then while he's doing it. He may really genuinely not be aware that he's doing it. But you need to help him see that he's doing it. And say, and I'm not suggesting that you not do it, but you do need to be aware that you are doing it. Then say, and when you do, I feel that you're not being faithful to our relationship, which we agreed would be exclusive, which is true. Then if he continues to defend himself and say, no, I didn't, and but, what's he telling you? He's telling you that he has no idea what a faithful, exclusive relationship is. And then you would be the fool to stay with him. See? Then what he's doing is he's telling you, I will not be faithful in a relationship. So if you choose to stay with him, then you have nothing to complain about. You're choosing to stay with an unfaithful man. So you need to be quiet. You need to learn to live with the pig and like it. And there are some guys who can't stay faithful. Some guys can't, won't, whatever. Can't. What's the difference between can't and won't if he chooses not to? After you've pointed it out to him. But the fact that he says, because she says here, she says that he cares about her, he loves her. What somebody says alone doesn't mean anything. Because they're not married. They're preparing to get married. And what somebody says alone means nothing. It's how they behave that matters. That's, in fact, all that matters. See, if he says, for example, well, I was just looking at a woman that was going by. Fine. Then you need to watch him. Watch him closely all day when he's in a crowd of people and see if he looks with his eyes as people goes by. Now watch him close, just casually watch him, but note him over 20 people in a row or 50 people in a row and see if he looks equally at the men that go by and at the women that go by. And then you learn the truth, don't you? It's like the story that I've told sometimes before, like, what if you go to a store and there's a cashier who gives you incorrect change almost every time you go through the checkout counter. And at the end of the year, you bring him a list of all the times he's given you incorrect change, and you show him that he has given you incorrect change every time. And he says, "Oh, well, my eyes just are bad, and I just couldn't see the prices very well, and they were just mistakes." Well, if the mistakes are 50% in your favor and 50% in the store's favor, then you would believe him that it was just a matter of eyesight and a mistake. But if the mistakes are all in his favor and you got cheated every time, then they're not mistakes, are they? He cheated you. And the same is true with your boyfriend. If his eyes go like this, only at the women and only at the pretty women, and he doesn't do this at the 80-year-old grandmothers on walkers, and he never looks like this at the teenage boys, then he's not just looking at people, is he? Pretty easy to tell if he's lying. It's like really easy. It's like brainless easy. I kind of chuckle at these guys who try to pull that old, "I'm not really looking at somebody," to their wives. I'm going, you got to be kidding me. That may work on a woman, but I'm not a woman. Here's somebody who says, "When I travel, I get drained, and sometimes I get exhilarated. On your trip, did you ever find yourself emptying out and using getting and protecting behaviors? If so, would you share with us when this happened and what you did about it?" On a trip, I sometimes do get, I assume she meant sometimes I get exhausted, probably. Do you ever find yourself emptying out? On a trip, sometimes I get tired, and when I do, if I find myself getting to the point where I think I'm going to use getting and protecting behaviors, what I've learned to do is just be quiet. If I get to the place where I'm going to behave in an unkind way toward people, then I just don't speak. And if I'm around people where I even have a hint that I'm going to behave in that way, I either be quiet if I'm in a place where I can't withdraw from people, or if I'm in a place where I can, then I just go to a place where I can be by myself and either recharge, take a nap, don't be with people. Now, what's the difference between withdrawing and running? Running is something that you do when you're afraid and you do involuntarily, whereas withdrawing is something that you do when you know that you can't handle a situation and you make the choice not to put yourself in a situation where you know you're going to be empty and afraid, and you know you're going to use getting and protecting behaviors. In that case, shut up and get out of there. So, at least that's what I've done. And then there have also been circumstances where I didn't withdraw in time. My wife and I are relatively new to real love and have been trying to practice telling the truth to each other. What I've experienced several times is that when I share my truth about something I've done wrong, my wife responds, sometimes with understanding, but most of the time with a response that turns the focus on her. And the conversation is no longer about the truth that I have told, but is now about her. And this has happened enough that almost as soon as it happens, I revert to my getting and protecting behaviors, and if I tell her that she has turned the conversation into something about her, she says, no, it's about the marriage and our communication. And since I'm not feeling heard and loved, the conversation goes downhill from there. What can I do if I want to tell the truth and yet do not feel I'm being heard? And what can I do to not fall into my getting and protecting behavior so quickly? All right, so let's say that you're in the conversation with her and she changes the conversation to be about her rather than about you. If you try to tell her that, it probably won't work. And the reason is, if she changed the conversation to be about her, that means that she's telling you that she's not in a place where she can hear you. And she's saying, it's like this. You brought up the conversation to be about you. If she changed the subject to be about her, what she's saying is, I don't want to listen to you. I want to be the speaker. And so, if you then say, you just changed the subject, then all she's really now going to say is, you don't understand. I don't care to listen to you. That's what she's going to do. And now, you're going to have a battle. So, at that point, really, all you can do is either choose to listen to her or to say, I would really like to finish this conversation, but I don't think I can finish it right now. So can we come back to this conversation in an hour or 2 hours or whenever it is? And is that fair? No, because you were the original speaker and she screwed it up. So she's wrong. She's wrong. But unfortunately, you can't tell her that. You can't. She's not in a place where she can hear it. And so if you and your wife are relatively new to real love, you're probably going to discover that at least half the time, maybe more, you're going to need the advantages of the teleconference calls, for example. And then finding people in the conference calls that you can speak to one-on-one in addition, or a coach, or there's so many ways of finding people to tell the truth to, but you're going to need somebody other than just her, because expecting somebody who's new in real love to be your wise person in the beginning is really hard. Because if they're new and you're new, they're not going to be able to listen to you very well. They're just not in a place where they feel loved enough and where they're loving enough to have what you need. It's just the way it is. It's not an accusation of them. It's just the facts. If somebody is just learning how to run, is just beginning to train, they don't go to somebody who has just gotten off the couch themselves to be their trainer. It's that simple. Here's somebody who says, I've been doing lots of conference calls lately, and I've noticed that when some people who are far more experienced in real love than I express extreme pain, that they sometimes seem to think that it is coming from the new awareness that real love has brought them. I've heard you say that the whole purpose in learning and practicing these principles is so that we will be happy. And that's what I'm experiencing from it now, is happiness. But down the road, I don't want to be so totally unhappy because of the new awareness, like some of these folks express that they are feeling. I certainly would not want to get others interested in real love and ultimately cause them pain instead of happiness down the road. So what do I need to see here? I understand that we learn when we're out of our comfort zone, but totally miserable and in pain? Yeah, I understand what you're talking about. When we've lived in emptiness and fear and with imitation love and getting and protecting behaviors all of our lives, we're not happy. But if that's how everybody around us has lived all of our lives, even though we're not happy, many of us are kind of satisfied with it. It's like normal. Then we learn about real love and discover that, wow, there's a whole new way of living. This is very cool. And so many people in real love go through the initial excitement of learning that there's an entirely new way of seeing love and happiness and relationships, and it's just exhilarating. It's like, woohoo! And so people get very excited. It's thrilling. Their level of happiness initially just shoots up. But then they go through a period of initial truth-telling and of realization and understanding, where they realize just how screwed up they've lived their whole lives. Where they realize things like, a client of mine just wrote me today and said, I'm just realizing how absolutely, horrifyingly unloving and unsupportive and damaging my parents have been to me my whole life. And some people overdo that phase. They overdo it like, oh, woe is me. Oh, what have I done? Like to my children, look how I've hurt my children, and look what my parents did to me, and oh, what terrible mistakes I've made. Oh, that's silly. Waste of time. And I think that's kind of what you're describing here, that these people are going, oh, with this new awareness, I see the terrible things that have happened, and quit it. Yes, with new awareness, the more we see, the more we're able to see the depths of the mistakes we've made. The more we're able to see how horrifyingly miserable we've been in the past, rather than just miserable. We see everything better. So with increasing clarity, we can see the awfulnesses of our life. But we can also see how unavoidable it was. We can see that our parents hurt us, yes, but we can see that they never meant to. And we can see that they did the best they could. And we can see that it was because they never were loved themselves. And so what? Like I tell people, if you're miserable at relationships and you don't know how to love people now in your life, it's all your parents' fault. And I mean that. But if you waste more than 5 to 10 minutes on that, that's just stupid. Because what good would it do to be angry at them for more than 5 minutes? They're not going to solve your problems now. Your parents aren't the ones who are going to heal you now. They're not the ones who are going to take the steps to tell the truth and fill your life with love now. And they did all that they could do. So, foolish. So, no, I can understand how you could perceive that some people would wallow in their perceptions of pain and guilt and anguish and so on as they see now in sharper relief the mistakes and flaws of their present and past, but those people don't understand the purpose of seeing their mistakes. It's just so that they can make better choices in the present. It's just so that they can come to a better understanding of how they got to be where they are now. It's not so that they can enjoy their pain. It's not so that they can wallow in their anguish or feel more guilty. So these people misunderstand the purpose of knowledge, and you've got a better understanding of that. So good for you. Another thing, by the way, that's very useful in learning how to become a better wise person is practicing live. And again, in Phoenix, we've got a seminar coming up August 2nd and 3rd, which is this weekend. Yeah. So, come to that. We've got people coming from all over the place for that, and I highly recommend it. There's reading and phone calls are wonderful, but seeing real love practice live is irreplaceable. So I recommend that you come if you can, and if you can't, recommend it to other people that you know. So we'll see you in Phoenix. Let's see, is it this weekend? Weekend after this weekend, August 2nd and 3rd, Saturday and Sunday. Be a delightful experience. And you'll get to meet many of the people whose names you see here on the lists. Here's somebody who says, if real love is the unconditional acceptance of another person and the caring about the happiness of another person without any thought of what one might get in return, and if unconditional means without expectations, constraints, or controls, then it seems to me that the extension of this line of thought leads to the dictionary definition of anarchy. We have an intellectual here. Love these. The literal extension implies that we do not need any personal, ethical, or moral compasses or social laws. See, at a meeting we had recently, one man mentioned this issue in passing when he was stating how difficult it is to follow the principles of real love. That's tempting reasoning, but you're using societal comparisons, or this man is, the man that you're talking about, not the questioner, as an excuse. The man who says that he's finding it difficult to follow the principles of real love for selfishness, and many people have done this. There's no comparison between individual relationships and the relationship of society to individuals. None. Now, why do I say this? I used to have questions like this in my own mind. Real love is caring about the happiness of another person and expecting nothing in return in individual relationships, and it's about love. But when you talk about anarchy, you're talking about the behavior of individuals as related to societies. And societies can't say, I will let you do whatever you want without expectations. Societies can't do that. That would be anarchy. In order for society to survive, there have to be contracts. In relationships, you don't make contracts. But for love, can't happen. There cannot be unconditional love with contracts. I mean, in individual relationships. But society has to have contracts, or it couldn't survive. And where there are contracts, there are expectations. So society says, I will offer you, all of you as individuals, protection under the law, safety, for example, roads, highways, number of things, defense, if you behave in these ways, in certain prescribed fashions. Without that contract, there really would be anarchy. Society couldn't exist without these expectations, whereas relationships can survive without expectations. I can say, I will accept all of you without any expectations of you at all, because if, for example, in any individual relationship, somebody decides not to behave in that certain way, they can just move on. Whereas in a society, that doesn't work out as well. People have to stay within that society. It's hard for people here just to say, well, I'm just going to move out of the country. People have to exist within that society. They can't, for example, decide, I'm going to kill my neighbor and then I'm going to move to Norway. Whereas I can, in an individual relationship, say, up yours, I'm going to disrespect you, I'm not going to love you, I'm going to do all the things that you find unacceptable in a relationship and move on. I can do that in an individual relationship, not a problem. And you would just go, see you. But if I decide I'm going to kill my neighbor, I don't just get to move on, because society has to protect me from the other members of society. So you can't compare individual relationships to the relationship of an individual to society. They're not comparable in at all. Tempting, but so you can't talk about anarchy and compare it to real love. However, big however here, society can offer real love. It can't be based only on real love, but it can offer it. So a society can say, for example, I will love you no matter what. But I will still have expectations of your behavior. So if you break the law, I will care about your happiness. I will provide, for example, if you kill, they can say to you, Greg, if you kill, we will still love you. But we will now impose consequences on you. And in fact, this is what I'm suggesting that society do. I've written articles about this. But we will care about your happiness while we impose consequences on you. We will imprison you. But rather than beat you and yell at you and make you feel terrible and throw you in a dark dungeon, and have the prison guards treat you abominably, we will put you in a safe place where you will not be allowed to hurt others so that you can't kill anybody else. We'll put you in an environment where you don't feel punished, but you will be isolated so you can't kill others. Possibly be rehabilitated if that can be done. But we will keep you in a place where you can't injure others and where others can't injure you. So society can be unconditionally loving and yet still impose consequences for people's behavior. But there's certainly no anarchy in real love. In fact, without real love, we get the lack of order that we see in the world today. So real love is actually the most ordered, organized, and powerful way for a society to be structured. It's the way to live. It's just hard for people to imagine, only because they haven't seen a society organized that way. Essentially, picture a family. Families that are run on real love are the most powerful, kind, organized, effective, efficient families that there are. And if a society is run in the same way, just picture more of the same. So everybody wins in a place that's run by unconditional love. I've had people now who've implemented these same principles in their businesses, and their businesses run better. Everything runs better when it's done in unconditional love. So in not this weekend, but weekend after next, we'll see you in Phoenix for the Real Love in Parenting. Then we'll see you next Tuesday for the Tuesday chat. And then would you please send me some more questions for next Tuesday's chat, and we'll go over those. And until then, we love you tons. We'll see you next Tuesday.